I am a gamer, and does anybody know what an MMORPG is? No? No?
Yes. Is it a massive multiplayer online role-playing game?
That's right. Yeah, massive multiplayer online role-playing game. So that's like World of Warcraft, EverQuest, Sims 3. Sims 3 is the one that is going to be most relevant to my presentation today. Those aren't real, right? They're not real?
Yes, they are.
But we're real, right? I am going to argue or persuade you guys that we do not technically exist. We are all characters in a simulation created by a future more advanced us, looking back at this point in time. So we are all characters in a simulation.
Whoa.
This is real.
Game changer.
So, this, I will play this quote here.
This software genius created a world filled with digital people, not too different from you and me.
Well, The Sims inside the computer really are digital recreations. They're simulations of humans. And so we basically have to describe to the computer all the kind of overall aspects that we think, encompass humanity. I think humans are very good at displacing their identity into others. We call that empathy. And so a lot of the game is based around empathy that you're feeling with the Sims, so that what they experience basically is what you're experiencing at one level removed.
But consider this. How much empathy do you think you could feel with this Sim? And how much with this one? The rate of increase in computing power that we've seen in the past few decades shows no sign of abating. And the level of realism of computer simulations is bound to keep pace with that. When our Sims look as real as our friends, won't the lines separating our real lives from our virtual lives begin to blur? One scientist from the Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena, California, believes we might be, and that the evidence could be all around us.
So, with simulated reality, so what can we say is real, right? Like stuff that we can touch, right? So I'm going to have a little stick figure here, and I'm arguing that we exist inside of bubbles of consciousness. So we have everything we can see, touch, taste, hear, and smell, right? And so everything outside that bubble, for all intents and purposes, doesn't exist. And when we're looking at something, we perceive it to exist, right? So, but when we look away, is it still there? We have no idea if it's there or not. And so with computing power and things like that, it would just make sense that when people aren't experiencing these things, they just don't exist. So the simulation can run much more smoothly if it doesn't have to create the whole universe. It only has to create what we're immediately experiencing. And so there'll be big concentrations of bubbles. Well, they'll overlap, like in cities, where there's like huge, like pockmarked, like one big pockmarked bubble of consciousness, and then they have vast spaces of nothingness, and then little towns with spaced out bubbles of consciousness. And you can kind of see where technology is going from, like when I grew up with Nintendo, and now we have Xbox 360, which is messed. And from that space, like that's 20 years. So imagine another 40 years, and with things like how Google Maps started with just a map, right? And now we have Google Earth, and then we have Google Street View, and all of these things are going to kind of culminate in higher interactivity and higher resolution, more kind of photorealistic experience. So how would we know what is real or not? So Oxford philosopher Dr. Nick Bostrom has three propositions for his simulation hypothesis. The first is that advanced societies will die out before they can create these simulations. So that's one option. The second option is that they get so advanced, but then they don't care about, or they lose interest in creating these simulations. So that they're so advanced that they don't really care, so they lose interest. But the third one is it's the creepiest one. It says that we do exist inside a simulation, and they say, or he says, that it's far more likely that we are characters in the simulation than the real people that we think we are. Because conservatively, let's say, okay, there's 7 billion people in the world right now, right? So let's say in 20 years, let's say that there's 10 billion, right? So when we become advanced enough to make these simulations, there's 10 billion real people. But when you make a simulation, you don't just make one simulation, right? You make, like, so World of Warcraft has tons and tons and tons and tons of servers that are all playing similar games, but very, very different on the inside, right? And in that game, they have millions of different characters that represent these 10 billion real people. So 10 billion in 10 billion different games, there's way more chance that we are part of this crazy, nearly infinite number than the 10 billion of real people who actually existed.
Rich Terrell has helped design missions to Mars, discovered 4 new moons around Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus, and taken pictures of a distant solar system. He has a logical mind and a love for technology. Now he's bringing that logic to a bigger question. Who or what is the creator?
For a God-centered universe, one has to think, well, first, what are the requirements for God? God is an interdimensional being, connected with everything in the universe, a creator, responsible for the universe, and in some way can change the laws of physics if he wanted to. And I think those are pretty good requirements for what God ought to be.
Terrell thinks those requirements for God, making the laws of the universe and changing things at will, sound an awful lot like what programmers do when they create simulated environments. And then he started thinking about how much computing power it would take to create our world, our planet, all its life, and all of our brains.
Moore's law is that computational power tends to double about every 2 years or 18 months. Actually, in the last 18 years, it's been doubling every 13 months. Right now, the fastest computers on the planet are now comparable or even exceeding the computational ability of the human brain, as we estimate it. That's about 1 million billion operations per second. Where it's taking us is that in the next year, that'll double. In the next decade, that'll increase by a factor of 500. So a decade from now, our supercomputers will be about 500 times faster than the human brain.
Rich is sure that computers a decade from now will be able to create a photoreal simulation of all that we see around us. But can a computer ever populate a simulated world with thinking beings like us? The answer is inside this box.
Suppose I have a box, and in the box I've got, a human brain, which is the mind or a person, and I've got a laptop computer. The human brain and a laptop computer are about the same weight. They're about the same volume, and they take about the same amount of power. Yet the human brain is about 100,000 times more powerful than a current day laptop. Well, suppose this is a laptop computer from 50 years from now, and I have them both in a box. and I start asking them questions, and I don't know which one is answering. If I can't tell the difference between a human being answering questions and a computer answering questions, then qualitatively they're equivalent. And if I believe that the human is conscious and self-aware, I must also believe that the machine has the same qualities.
Once computers have the power to simulate artificially intelligent beings inside a photorealistic representation of the planet Earth, the ramifications are truly profound.
Suppose we have an enormous simulation, and we're simulating artificial intelligence. We created this universe, we're able to change the laws of physics, we're able to do all the things, all of those requirements that we put on God.